This week, I'm reading the lowest rated book and the highest rated book on my TBR. Hello friends and reader. I feel like I say this every week, but another week, another reading vlog. I do work full-time, 40 hours in a week. However, reading is a hobby of mine, so I read about 2 books a week, especially when I'm doing reading vlogs. And I'm always trying to find a fun way to get books off my TBR that I put on there and I may never pick up or get to at all. I've done this video concept, I believe, twice in the past, and I've had a really good experience. One of the highest rated books I read off my TBR was The Nightingale, and it was like a 6-star read for me. The other one was a Liz Tom Ford sports romance, and now this is probably the highest rated book on my TBR and one of the most intimidating books on my TBR. I love doing stuff like this. I feel like it's a fun way to just read books that you were interested in at once, and maybe you never look at your TBR, maybe you're always reading off your TBR, but some of them just get lost. I think that my digital TBR, because by the way, I don't keep physical books hanging around on a TBR. I don't have the money or the space for that. Both of the books I'm reading this week, I got from the library yesterday. But my digital TBR has, I think, around 48 to 50 books on it. There are some that I put on there 3 years ago, and there's some that I put on there last week. And in fact, I think that the lowest rated book we're reading this week, I just put on there. So we're gonna quit yapping and get straight to reading, because that first book that we're reading is chunky. And if you're wondering what this book is, this week we're starting with The Will of the Many. It is the next day, and I wanted to give you an update on our reading progress for this vlog. We have started the highest rated book on our TBR. I am using Goodreads to figure out what book is highest and lowest on my TBR. Shall I say on my digital TBR, to be read books. I do actually try to track my books on both Goodreads and Fable. For the last year, really, I've been trying to figure out which app I prefer. I think that I like the aesthetic and the looks of Fable a lot better, but sometimes the functionality of Goodreads is easier for me. One thing that of course I miss on Goodreads is being able to do star ratings in between even numbers, so being able to have like a 4.5 star rating, because somehow they have not made that update on Goodreads. But Goodreads did recently add a DNF shelf, a did not finish shelf, so I appreciated that. So I'm still tracking on both apps just to finally maybe one day figure out which one I want to solely use. One of the filters that Goodreads has for the TBR is to filter by average rating, which I haven't been able to find in the want to read shelf on Fable. So all that to be said, we are using Goodreads. The other thing is that when you look up by average rating, a lot of the highest rated books are books that have not been released. So I think there were 3 or 4 that were up at the top of mine that aren't even out yet. So I had to make sure I found the one that is released and has reviews. I thought it was going to be 6 of Crows by Lee Bardugo. I said that the exact same. But when I went back to check for this video, it is not the highest rated book anymore. That's because I have added The Will of the Many on there more recently, in like the last month. I think I said earlier in my introduction clip that I was able to get this from the library. Both books were available immediately at the library, which I love. So I placed a hold and went and picked up after work on Wednesday. It is now Friday. For this book, we have made it to page 101. Some of these chapters are a little bit longer, and of that, we have got a long ways to go. We have some progress to do. This book was very intimidating for me. It has a rating of 4.58 on Goodreads out of 237,000 reviews, which is a lot. The reason why I put this on my TBR is because I've just seen it all over my algorithm. All those reviews, all of these booktubers and people doing book recommendations have been recommending this book, and you can tell by all of the ratings. It is a part of a series, what's called the Hierarchy series, and it's book number 1. Book number 2 is already out, but I don't think that book number 3 is out. The second book might be called The Strength of the Few, potentially. And I do think that this author has another popular series out, another trilogy series out. It says it on the book, internationally best-selling author of the Lacanius trilogy. Words today, man. This is in the fantasy genre. I do think it has bits of epic fantasy, high fantasy, maybe even a little bit of science fiction in it. And there are, in this copy of the book, 620 pages. It's one of the longer books that I've had to read in a while. I did also try to put a hold on the e-library. Sometimes lugging around a massive book like this isn't always fun, so my e-library hold should also become available soon. It was pretty readily available in my area. With my drive home from work yesterday, I started this book listening on Spotify Hours, but then I picked it up all evening last night to get to page 100. And I think that I needed to start by listening to the book in the first 2 to 3 chapters to help me sort of build this world. When there are fantasy books as big as this one, I am intimidated because sometimes it's hard for me to build that imagination and put together a picture in my head. And it can make me feel so lost when we're learning all of these new characters and places and hierarchy of systems, especially for names and things that are hard to pronounce. So having the audiobook in the first few chapters allows me to be able to pronounce those words in my head and have a good picture of it. We barely cracked the surface on what this book is going to be about, and I just think that it is so funny that you can have a small summary on the inside of a book like this, and this somehow is gonna give you a snapshot of what all of this is about. I'm gonna hold off on giving any synopsis or summary until I've gotten a little bit more in, and I'll catch up with you then. It has been a few days since I picked up the camera to give you an update. We are reading the highest rated book on my TBR, which is The Will of the Many. We are what I think is now halfway finished with this book. I've made it to page 324. I'm in the middle of a chapter right now, and I wanted to give you an update. I'm not going to lie, the pacing of this book is very daunting, and it feels like maybe I could be entering a reading slump. Based off of all of the really good ratings and recommendations for this book, I feel like I should be more into it than I am, but I did have sort of a premonition that this wouldn't be a book that I would have picked up otherwise, and that might be seeping into my motivations to read the book. The writing's good, the story is interesting, and you are building such a massive world, but that has been hard for me to want to read in the last few days. I think really it's stretching my mind, and part of that is putting me past my comfort level of a safety read, I guess, and maybe I could have picked a better time to pick this one up, but I don't want that to continue into the second half of the book. I really want to give it a fair chance, so I'm going to try to get into a better headspace when I read this. It is now Sunday, so I'm going to take some time today. I don't have much to do to really try to get in a good mindset to finish out the rest of the book. And I really don't think I've given you any sort of synopsis of what this is about, and I'm gonna stick to everything that you could find on a short summary of it. We are following a society that is called the Hierarchy. It is the republic of this book, and the Hierarchy assumes that they know everything that's going on, but of course in a fantasy book we peel back the layers and find out there are things going on that the Hierarchy may or may not have control of. And we are following our main character, Vis. That's V-I-S. Vis, we know, is orphaned. There was an accident that took his parents from him a few years back. He went to an orphanage, and from there he was adopted by one of the more prestigious members of this republic, or of this hierarchy. This person adopted him, and now he is going to the academy. The academy is essentially where the children of the republic go throughout school to learn about the hierarchy and are essentially ranked ranked as they go through this school. For instance, our main character starts out as rank number 7 or a part of the 7s and then moves up from there. The higher the number, it's kind of backwards. The higher the number, the least ranked you are. The lower the number, the higher ranked you are. The biggest part of this society and the hierarchy is exactly what you read on the title, The Will of the Many. Essentially, the hierarchy is taking the will of the people. And when you say will, it is like their drive, their strength, their focus, their motivations. They are sapping that from the people to then power themselves. And we are following this character Vis as he goes through the academy to sort of ascend the ranks, but he's also there to discover the secrets and the lies that are being told by the hierarchy, or maybe the hierarchy don't know about these lies. Either way, there's some things to uncover while they are there. So I'm gonna keep reading. I hope things turn around in the second half for me. It has nothing to do with this book and all to do with the time that I picked it up and then my personal preference for reading lately, and it just being a long world building book. I want to update you once I finish it. Hopefully we can knock it out in the next few days. Okay. Oh my goodness. It has been a few days since I started the first book of the vlog, The Will of the Many, this behemoth of a book, at least behemoth for me. The last update I gave you was that I felt like I was going into a reading slump, and no fault to this book that maybe this book was helping push me into one, or not helping by pushing me into one. And I want to start by saying this was a great read. It just was not the right time for me to pick it up. I'm gonna rate The Will of the Many a 3.5. And with all books that I rate and put myself on the internet rating, I always preface by saying that these are my personal preferences and readings. And I also like to rate a book and say why I liked it, and instead of rating a book and saying why you shouldn't read it. That is not the case ever. The world building was fantastic. There was so much going on. While at times it did feel a little bit slow for me, or a lot of times it felt slow for me, I recognize it's not the writing, it's not the expertise of the author, it's just me. I wasn't ready for a big fantasy world building book this week when I picked this up. And the ending, since I last talked to you, the last 50% of the book, or less than 50% of the book, really did pick up a lot for me, especially in the last few hundred pages. And you can see how you are building this world into book number 2, The Strength of the Few. I am grappling with, do I want to read that? I try to read books in series that are interconnected or really are impacted by book number 1 for book number 2 immediately while everything is fresh on the brain. However, I don't think I'm going to be able to pick up the second book anytime soon. Just with being in the mood for it, I am not in the mood to pick up book number 2, but it does end in a way that makes you want to go grab the next book to continue on. This might be one of those that I revisit when my cat is just crying. Come here, Archie. I summoned him. Let's see if he'll come. Come here, buddy. You gonna talk to the camera? He's been getting a lot of patio time outside, and I'm on a lunch break, so he wants to go outside. You can't scream while I'm filming. No comment? What was I even saying? Oh, it might be one of those things. I don't know if book number 3's release date has been announced. It might be a few months or years away from that, just because of how big of a story these are. Might be that I come back to book number 2 and read that finally. Once we get a release date for book number 3, I'll definitely have to pick up some summaries to refresh my mind on everything that happened in this gigantic book. I can certainly see why this is all over my feed and why it has such high ratings. And also, when I meant to say earlier with the 3.5, that means I really liked the book, that I had a good time with the book. I just usually reserve a 4 or a 5, 4 or higher for books that I love and rave about for my personal preferences. But I definitely see why this is such a high rating for everyone else picking it up. up. It's one of those ones you should be in the mood for. This is Victoria, who already ended that clip, but I'm bouncing in the middle of the clip because editing Victoria is gonna throw you into the middle of the clip to say, for the author of this, James Islington, and for all authors really that write books, like, how in the world do you create stories like this? I feel when I say I have no creative bone in my body, it's when I read a book and I'm like, I could never imagine up a world and then put pen to paper to allow others to imagine up the world. I think it's so cool, so fascinating. That goes for all authors. All that being said, I am now going to go into book number 2, the lowest book on my TBR, or the lowest rated book on my TBR. And funnily enough, I might be more excited about this lowest rated book on my TBR than I was about the highest. It's actually only been a day since I last picked up the camera, and we have now started the lowest rated book on my TBR. Before we jump into that, I know that my lowest rated book changed more recently. Funnily enough, both of these books that I'm reading this week I had added to my TBR within the last 3 weeks, and one of them was the highest and now one of them was the lowest. The other one that was pretty low that I thought was going to end up being one of the books that I read was Never Over by Claire Gilmore. I read a book when I did reading Haley Pham's 5-star reads. I read a book by Claire Gilmore, so I wanted to keep them on my radar because I ended up really liking that book, and so I thought I was gonna end up reading that, but then when I updated my TBR and added this week's book, it became the lowest rated, which so far I'm not so sure why. We are reading Loved One by Aisha Muhar, is how I believe it is pronounced. The ratings for this one is a 3.73 out of 24,500 reviews, which is a ton in my opinion. Not nearly as much as The Will of the Many at 237,000, but still 24,000, nearly 25,000 reviews. A lot of people. I had recognized this book from people in the book world recommending it based off of the cover. The cover just stands out to me. I absolutely love this cover. I'm obsessed with the colors on it. I love the illustrations that they put on here. And for the back of the book at least, I'm already starting to recognize important pieces of the puzzle for this book. I wanted to discover a little bit more about this author before picking up the book, so I looked them up, but also it tells you in the back of the book a little bit about them. They are an Emmy award-winning writer and producer. They worked on shows like Hacks, Parks and Recreation, The Good Place, so really notable TV shows. I've heard of at least The Good Place and Parks and Recreation. I haven't watched either of them, and this appears to be their first novel. I checked Goodreads and it looks like they had a novel on there listed under their name, but it was from like 24 years ago and maybe it wasn't even a novel. I didn't look much into it. This is what they appear to be claiming as their debut. And the book came out last year in 2025 in August, so I would say a relatively newer book, not newest, but within the last year. And it's a great switch of pace. This book is only going to be about 326 pages, which is chef's kiss. And if you even just look at the pages and the font size compared to The Will of the Many, I am flying through this book. It is reviving me from what I thought may be a book slump that The Will of Many kind of put me into. I did mention before I got this from the library. I'm always relatively surprised when the library has a book that came out within the last year. My local library tends to keep up though. And I was super excited because this is literary fiction, which is right up my alley. It's a breath of fresh air after building a massive world in The Will of the Many, coming to literary fiction, things that feel very character driven in real life, something that I tend to lean on more and more as a comfort genre recently. And we've already made it to page 150. This book has longer chapters and a little bit of a unique structure and format of the story. It will switch timelines in the middle of a chapter. It might be broken up by a space and a paragraph, but you could switch timelines, and sometimes you've got to be locked in to realize we are no longer longer in present day, we have gone to the past. And then of course, a quick synopsis that you would only find in the summary of this book. So if you find that summaries are spoilers, then maybe don't listen to this quick synopsis. We are following Julia. From the very get-go, the first chapter of this book, you learn that one of Julia's good friends, Gabe, has passed away. He passed away at a young age. I believe he was only like 29, so approaching 30. With Gabe having passed away, Julia is trying to recover some of his possessions for his family member, in particular his mom. Him being a musician and floating around from place to place, his things that have been important to this family are things that they're trying to figure out where they are so they can bring them back to her. So Julia kind of takes on this quest herself, and in the process meets one of Gabe's exes, his ex-girlfriend in particular, and it's kind of turning into a love triangle, which is a unique spin on this because it's a love triangle where we know one of the people is already dead. In fact, the person keeping the others in the triangle together is no longer there. I am what seems like halfway through already, 150 out of 320. Yeah, I'm just now approaching halfway. Sorry, math on a Tuesday. I've read 150 pages all in the last 24 hours. Safe to say that I'm really having a good time reading this one. I'll probably finish it within the next day and give you my final thoughts on Loved One. We have officially finished Loved Ones by Aisha Muhar, and this is the quickest I have finished a book in I don't even know how long. Nothing is coming to mind. I finished this in just over 24 hours. I started it on, what's today? I started it Monday after work, but like right before I was going to sleep, so Monday night. And I finished it yesterday after work in the later evening time. So it could have been just 24 hours or right over 24 hours. I haven't flown through a book like this in so long. I'm gonna rate this book a 4 stars. I, time and time again, am proven that every time I finish a literary fiction book, it's always a 4-star or a 5-star. And I need to hone in on finding books that are like this one and picking them up, because this kind of helped save me from a really bad reading slump following the first book of this reading vlog. So if you have any recommendations out there for literary fiction that read like this, please drop them. This book walks you through definitely so many different stages of grief. You know from the beginning that someone has passed away, but with the dual timelines of going back and forth between when they were here and when they weren't here, you are walking through that grief and how it looks different for every single person that touched that person. It really just kind of zooms out, and this book makes you realize that you really have no clue how you or someone else you know dearly is impacting other people's timelines and other people's stories. And rating this a 4-star, it just goes to show that even if you put a book on your TBR and it's rated really lowly, depending on your book preferences, you might rate it highly, or the exact opposite. There could be a book rated really highly on your TBR that is really low on someone else's. You know what I'm trying to say. So while sometimes book ratings are a good indicator of basics, breaking down the book to writing and structure and plot, entertainment, other times it has everything to do with the timing and the person picking up that book, which honestly is the coolest thing about reading. It was a really quick wrap up for this book. I had a great time. I enjoyed the ending despite it not being a pretty bow on a story that you know from the beginning is going to be a bit sad. And that wraps it up for reading the lowest and highest rated book on my TBR. I love doing this video every few months. I allow myself to add books and move books off my TBR, and then one day I randomly decide to do this video and I never know what I'm going to be reading that week. So that's all. Bye for now. Oh, just kidding. This is a reminder to return your library books, but also go to the library. Pick up some books from the local library.